The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Any past performance discussed during this program is no guarantee of future results. Any indices referenced for comparison are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. Any references to performance of securities are thought to be materially accurate and actual performance may differ. As always, please remember investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional.
And we are back with another edition of the Daily Dots, and I am joined as always by the brain trust himself, Mr. Chase Taylor. We were talking a little football here off screen. I'm sure the folks would love to hear that. But yeah,
my Browns ruining our draft chances, by winning a game is a little unfortunate.
You mean Myles Garrett winning a game?
Shedeur Sanders is 1-0.
The Cleveland Miles. That's what they should change their name to. The Cleveland Garretts.
I'm okay with that.
Good Lord. Sanders didn't look that bad.
No, played pretty well.
Yeah. Especially if Jerry Jeudy doesn't just forget that somebody's running behind him and just.
Jerry Jeudy forgets a lot of things. Usually catching the ball.
Yeah. Boy. He's so good too.
Yeah.
Just he can't keep his head on straight.
Yeah.
Didn't he come out the same year that Ruggs came out?
I think that might be right. It was definitely a year there was two Bama guys, and he kind of fell more than you would have thought. Because there was a Bama guy that went ahead of him. It may have been Ruggs, because Ruggs ran a 4.2 or whatever. So yeah. I think it was the Raiders that freaked out and got him, because the Raiders get every guy that runs a 4.2 in history.
Darius Hayward-Bay. He's a real.
There's a laundry list of fast guys that can't play football that the Raiders played with.
Yeah. I call it their Jamarcus Russell drafting style. Anyway, let's get to the markets. So,
let me start with.
I guess I mean, apparently all the problems in the world were fixed, and it's party time again.
I think it might be party time again. S&P up 1.5, a little over. Q's up 2.5, a little over. Small caps 1.8, equal weight up 0.4, so pretty big lagging there, because you had Mag 7 up 3.3, All World XUS up 0.13, but I will say EEM had a pretty decent day. The dollar was flat. Bitcoin was up 2.5. You're back to just under 89,000 there after being at like 80. Oil up 1.5. Gas down a little bit. Gold up a little over 1.2. Gold miners up over 5, as I think Barrick is getting their mine back in Mali, so they jumped, and I think they're pretty big weighting there. Silver up 2.5. Yields flat on the front end, down 3-4 basis points, 10 and 30 year. You're back at like 75% chance now of a cut in December. As far as the Mag 7 and Oracle was up a little bit, so give it up for Oracle not being down today. Then you had Apple up over 1, Google up over 6, Microsoft up a tiny bit, Meta up over 3, Tesla up almost 7. You had Nvidia up 2, which is, given everything, not that impressive. Amazon up about 2.5. I will note ARK up 4.7. And Vol down almost 8%. You're back under 20 on Vol.
The move we've seen in Google, anybody that's been listening to that knows that we're not surprised by that. That makes a lot of sense. One of the things that we were talking about, though, is happy that we've gotten that one right. But to me, another great example of how we got to come up with a term like this of just how different this market is from what it's been in the past, what it's supposed to be in the past. And what I mean by that is, we talk about it all too often. People talk about dysfunctioning markets when the markets do not coordinate properly with what they like, right? So I think it's a good time to talk about that as it relates to something that we do like, and do that in kind of an effort to emphasize to people what we mean when we say markets aren't functioning properly. Because this time we were able to use what we believe with markets not functioning properly to our advantage. And one of the things we've talked about is, when you're sitting there talking about how bad a market is at price discovery, if that is in fact the case, then there should be things that are too cheap, right? And we very much thought Google was. And I think the way that this pop has happened in Google shares kind of proves the point. Meaning, if you talk to people that are excitedly buying Google today and over the past week, and you ask them why, they will cite to you probably 9 out of 10 of the same reasons that we've been talking about for the last year and a half. right? And this is what we talk about when we say the market is not behaving the way it should, because Google now, in my opinion, is pricing in things that were knowable and obvious for the last year and a half, 2 years, right? Markets should be pricing those things in all along, right? When you've got now, they're never going to price things perfectly according to the book of Chase and Zach. But when you see things rallying for these certain reasons, like for AI, and then the world wants you to believe, or the market wants you to believe that Google doesn't play in that field, you're like, no, they're probably the hub of that wheel. They might be the most important AI player in that whole space. And then you see the release of Gemini 3 coming out. I think it underlines a lot of the other things that we discussed, which is that Gemini 3, which is getting amazing reviews, didn't use a single H100 NVIDIA chip. They used all their own. How long have you and I been talking about their chip business? Oh, everybody loves chips. Everybody loves the semis, but nobody pays attention to the fact that Google makes them. And I would think, now they haven't said this yet, but I would think that they'll start I would think.
I think they have said it. They're going
to make them available to outside.
They're going to expand
vendors.
their capacity and sell them to other people.
Yeah, there you go.
Now, who all is going to want them and use them and buy them and what price and all that, that's pretty far away, I think. But that's the one thing I will say. Like, if you go back to listening to us 9 months ago or something, we were very bullish for a lot of different reasons. Some very basic, some of the parts reasons, which are often not good reasons in the market, but all the way up to like, hey, these TPUs could be a big deal someday. I think them clearly showing themselves is a big deal now. That is new.
Yeah, that's fair.
And deserves its own recent premium. But
that being said, though, if you think back to one of the things that we were talking about,
it was a right tail thing that was there that no one cared about.
Yeah, and we already knew that those chips were highly successful and highly advantageous when it came to certain applications in AI, not all of them. And like I said, it's just bizarre to sit there and watch. And I think a lot of it plays into a conversation we were having today. There's a running joke that we've had, which is, and I'm sure we're not the ones that created the phrase, but at the top of market, everybody's a technical analyst. At the bottom, everybody's a fundamental. And I don't think that that's ever been more true today. And I think when you hear a lot of market commentary, that's at least the only way that I can square that circle, right? Where you hear people, it was like we were talking about that day. It's probably 4 months ago, 5 months ago. We heard the guys on CNBC bagging on Google, talking about how they were getting out, going short, doing all this. And I think at that time, Google was trading like around 150, 160 a share. And you went and actually looked at it. But you and I heard all the reasons that they were citing for why they didn't like it. And they were just wrong. They just didn't know what they were talking about. And I think investors need to be aware of that right now, that all you hear, well, not all you hear, but so much of what you hear right now is people looking at a chart and then manufacturing reality to correspond with the chart.
Right.
Okay. I believe technical analysis is an important tool, especially in this market, but that's not how you should use it. Right. It should be a piece of data, and I think it's a very important one. But if everybody's looking at the charts, then you have to expect the fact that there's big misses on the fundamentals, right? There's a lot of things being missed on the fundamentals. And I think Google's even more proof too that, oh, you can't beat the market. The market's so efficient. The market knows everything. No, it's nonsense. That's nonsense. Look how mispriced Google was just 6 months ago. And nothing financially has really changed. They haven't had a big announcement. They didn't blow out in earnings, right? Nothing's really changed. The market just became aware of things that we've been talking about for a year.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note now, before I say what I'm about to say, because there's a lot of right tail possibilities that still aren't priced. They're still available. I'm going to talk about those. But before I do, I will say the RSI, weekly RSI is like 82. So as far as like short term goes, it's earned its right to have a 20-25% pullback, no problem. And that wouldn't be so shocking given that RSI. But back, 9 months ago, we were talking about the TPUs, the fact that like, hey, they're actually pretty good at AI too. Like they actually thought up a lot of this stuff, like literally. So maybe they will be the ones that can get a lot of it right. When I look forward, and we've talked about this before, but like the hardware side, man, like if you look at how many people are using Gemini, it's a lot. like more than ChatGPT. But if you look at how many people use the Gemini app, it's not very many. So the growth potential in the Gemini app is really huge. And then obviously if you get the hardware, if you get the new Pixel, it's like built in, and it's like the automatic default way of interacting with AI is just to use the Gemini, right? So if more people use the Gemini app, and if more people decide like, why don't I just get the phone? What that does for their earnings is so substantial. And then there's still all these right tail possibilities of things like Waymo, like we talked about before. Now Waymo doesn't make any money yet. It's not a big deal from an earnings perspective, but thinking about what the world looks like 25 years from now perspective, it could be a huge deal. And they're actually starting to get on the highway now for the first time.
Hey, I mean,
they're moving to other countries for the first time. Like
the potential of full self-driving is good for 1.2 trillion in market cap for Tesla.
Right? Yeah.
Right. If I could just get a third or a fourth of that for Google, I'd be happy.
The wearable, I think one of the most important things in the tech space for the next 5 years is who wins wearables. Now, maybe nobody wins and everyone just uses different, the glasses that do cool stuff. Like right now, Meta, I think, is winning that race with their Ray-Ban stuff. But, for all we know, Snap or Google or somebody else like comes in and creates a better mousetrap.
I know, but got to be careful, man.
There's a bunch of right tails left for Google. It's not just the fact that they have the best AI model today and the chips. Now the chips is a big deal because if you take market share from NVIDIA, even if it's a little bit, that's a huge deal. And then obviously if you take a little bit of, imagine this. Now this is right tail, big time, but you take a little bit of market share from NVIDIA on chips and a little bit of market share from Apple on phones. I mean,
dude, think about the integration.
This thing still trades at 22 times forward earnings.
Who else is in phones, wearables, and automobiles at the same time?
Not to mention all kinds of other things.
Okay, but just think about the synergies, because as wearables get good, they'll probably be standalone products, but at least in the beginning, I would think that they would be the best when used in combo with a phone.
Right, because you already use this. A lot of people already use the stack of their email, their calendar,
right?
And that integrating all this stuff and like you, at the end of the day, somebody's probably going to win the whole thing because it just makes sense to have it all under one roof so that it all plugs into each other really well, right?
Well, yeah, you think about the synergies between right there, phone, the wearable glasses, and the car, and think about the way that those things, the cool stuff you could interact, right? Full heads up display for your car where, visible inside the glasses, phone to text reading on the glasses, translation software via the glasses,
real-time translation on the glasses.
Yeah. All that stuff we talked about.
Google Wallet.
That's why I haven't. Here's the question. Are you ready to make the jump to that phone?
Yeah. So I have internally to myself committed that my next phone will be the Pixel.
Okay.
Now, I will admit I might do two phones for a while, but yeah, I'm ready to do it. But I'm a Gmail, Google Calendar person anyway. Like it just doesn't seem that difficult.
Yeah. My only thing that I'm not, or that I'm hesitant about, is just phone or pictures, videos.
It's just a pain.
Yeah.
They've made it easier and easier. Like they have like a whole system where it makes it like much more painless than it used to be, from my understanding. But your whole life is on your phone these days. So to have to deal with all the movement of it and, little things like FaceTime is really easy.
Yeah.
And now I got to find some app for that or whatever. And then the people that use iPhones aren't going to have that app or whatever. Like it'll be a little more difficult.
Yeah. But they're closing that gap. No, the potential with what they can do. And the other thing is that hopefully people will go try it. I don't think the average phone user or the average person out there has any clue how far ahead those phones are, when compared to the iPhone.
Yeah, the visual AI stuff is phenomenal. Like,
you're 2 generations ahead.
The camera's great. Like they're really good phones.
Yeah, they're pretty outstanding.
And not many people have made that switch yet. But the more Gemini gains ground, the more it gets a little more attractive to use the hardware.
I just,
And I think at some point it becomes a waterfall, just like the iPhone was. I remember not wanting to go from BlackBerry to iPhone vividly,
yeah.
but it just got to this point where like, well, almost everyone was doing it, and it was almost like hard not to. And then the first time you used an iPhone, you're like, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
So I think you're just going to get to the point where people see how effective Gemini is on the Pixel, and they're like, all right, well, it's time.
Yeah, man, they're pretty, they're sweet phones. The one thing I haven't done is I have not played with them side by side with the Samsung.
The Samsung phone's probably better, honestly.
Really?
Than the Pixel. Yeah.
You think so?
My understanding is that phone's their best phone's probably the best phone there is.
Okay. Well, and I've had a Samsung Galaxy before. They were really good phones. But yeah, Google is one, and you can even see it in the valuation. I mean, it's stretched on the RSI, and for those of relative strength index, this gives us a good idea where the stock is in relationship to other stocks. Like, is it really hot? Is it not? Right.
Yeah. And it's on the weekly, it's basically as high as it's ever been. So that's when you consider it short-term overbought.
Yeah.
It becomes accident prone at those levels. It doesn't mean it can't go up another 30% in the next month. It just means it's accident prone at that level.
You know who's got to be having a good year right now is Ackman. I mean, I think this was like a 12. I think he came into the year
IPOing. So,
oh, he is.
I think I saw that the other day. He's gonna be able to IPO Pershing. So I'm assuming he's doing okay.
Yeah. Well, he's got to have a big year because Google was a big position for him. I think it was like 13% of his book or something like that. We wanted to go bigger in it just at the time because it just felt like, and another investing, and it doesn't work like this all the time. But when you find those companies that are putting up the numbers, and you don't find them all the time, they're not always out there, and I think you can get in trouble looking for them. But so often, some of my biggest wins have come from just sitting around and letting things like that come to me, where all of a sudden you look at it and go, okay, why is this thing trading here?
And I think everyone just assumed it was cheap for a reason, like so many things are, but it just wasn't.
They're looking at charts, and that was the point that I was bringing. When everybody starts looking at a chart, I think you should always look at the charts. You got to. It's to me, I see them as charts, fundamentals. Like, I'm not going to go into any trade without looking at either of them. But when it all becomes about the chart, by definition, you're missing a lot, and that's where I think you start getting in trouble where you start seeing guys assigning statistics to try to fit a chart. And it was like listening to Josh Brown and that other guy on CNBC, 6-7 months ago, talking about Google, and you hear them go down the checklist, and you didn't disagree with them, but what they were saying was just fundamentally wrong. They were just incorrect.
Right. It's one thing to, and I think you're right. Like, just, hey, look, like, not doing well. It's cheaper than the other stuff, probably for a reason. It's probably because search is half the business. Obviously AI is going to kill search. Like, this is gonna be a big problem. So for like a moment like that, it's as simple as like investigate it, right? Go look at the vertical of search, see how it's doing. And then you go looked it up, and it was growing maybe double digits at that point. So it's
high single.
Okay, well, search is fine. Now, should you put a pin in that and then watch search like a hawk from there? Sure. Like, because that's
a threat.
It's not a crazy narrative, right?
Yeah.
But like we did when we talked about it on the show, it's like, cool, let's zero search. Okay, now it's still, that would have been trading at the same PE at that moment as Microsoft was if you zero to search. So then it was like, okay, well, that's not just priced in, it's more than priced in. And obviously you're not going to zero search.
Right.
Like, it's
not
Google, right?
Yeah.
And then you just listen to management. They're telling you, like, okay, here's the deal. Since we started on the AI overviews, like, here's what's happening to search. And it's like, oh, well, it's not hurting. It may be even helping. And then they mentioned a few other things. And what you do when you find something, you go steal, man. You find the best arguments against your baby, and then you just investigate them. You just look at the facts. And in that case, there was a lot of stuff for Google that you could find, and then you almost every time you investigate it, and you're like, no, that's not only is that not compelling, that may just be dead wrong. It's fun when you find that, but it is rare to find, especially in a Mag 7 company.
Yeah.
It's one thing to find something that no one's heard of and be like, oh, everyone's sleeping on this. Like, yeah, because no one's heard of it.
Yeah.
But to have one of the most profitable company on earth, and everyone's writing it off, like, while you can sit there and pick apart narratives and go, nope, like, those opportunities don't come around very often.
No, but the other thing that if there are any of you out there that still believe in the efficient market hypothesis, that's another shot in that thing. Because to your point, if Google can be that mispriced, don't come out and say it. It was horrifically mispriced, especially on a comp basis, right? If it can be that mispriced, a company that followed, a company that's the
Every
third
analyst,
largest company in the
yeah.
world that's ever existed, and they're that far off, right? Nobody was, and here's the way you can tell it. How many people other than us have you heard talking about their chips? How many people other than us have you heard talk about Waymo? You listen to somebody on TV talk about Google, unless they know it and they're a bull, they don't bring any of those things up. They act like they don't even exist.
Right.
And those are big businesses. These are big deals.
And we're not even talking about some of the big bet stuff like AlphaFold and stuff that could end up being a very big deal someday. Like they have a lot of different businesses that are powerful potential in the future that everyone's sleeping on. And again, like truly, so much of the LLM world we live in today was their engineers thinking that stuff up 20 years ago. Like they just kind of shelved it because they didn't think they could make it dependable enough. And, to other people's credit, they took the ball and moved it forward, and then they had to play catch up, but boy, did they.
Yeah, they did. And that's the other thing too. You know, what's funny is I'd like to hear their management talk specifically about their home run bets, because they've made a bunch of them, and a lot of them aren't seen. A lot of them are smaller. You've never heard of them, but over the years, and I'm not just talking about it now, they've got so many beachheads out there in so many of these technical areas. What's funny is you start realizing that when you run a smaller company, especially if it's geared toward anything technological in that space, you would not believe the amount of patents and the amount of Google fingerprints we found even in the audio space, right? Them buying up this piece of tech as it relates to this. And I just don't think people have I know people do not have an understanding of how far Google has spread its net.
Right. They got a lot of Legos.
Oh man, they've got tons of them. And one of the things you never know, and this is one of the reasons companies like that make their bets, it's like you said about that. There's several times where you have a company that has a breakthrough, but the technology surrounding them isn't caught up to a point where it can bring that, you know what I mean? They can deliver that technology in an efficacious way. And so you'll have these things just sitting there kind of biding their time, waiting for the ecosystem around them to get to the point. And then all of a sudden it's like instant, right? Add water, boom. Now you got a multi-billion-dollar business on your hands.
Right. It's what I've talked about with like the cost curves and things like just batteries, right? Just because batteries got lightweight and cheap, all of a sudden there's so many things you hadn't thought of that become a real business. And then to your point, if you're a company like Google and it's working on all this little stuff, like you may have these little, like almost like embryos just hanging out, waiting. And the next thing you know is like, wait a second. Now that this is a viable technology, can't it plug into that over there and we might have something?
Yeah.
And that's basically innovation in a nutshell.
Yeah.
How it works.
Yeah. And then especially when you think about like Waymo being in the cars, right? And the way you could integrate that with, it's pretty compelling.
Right. They're creating a powerful stack, an ecosystem that becomes magnetic and feeds on itself, because if you have 3 of the 8 parts of the stack, it becomes almost silly not to start using the other 5, right?
Yeah. The other thing I will say too, especially right now, and from my read on it, I think that you'd have to have a completely different administration in place. And I think you'd have to have, and I don't think it's necessarily party specific. I think it'd have to be individual, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I actually don't think it's a good thing long-term for the company, but I feel like the risk of any of these big tech companies getting broken up under this administration is effectively zero.
Yeah. I think it's clear by this point.
And to be fair to them, when I say that, I'm not sure that it would be different under any other administration right now, not with the threat of China running away with AI.
Yeah, big tech's been here for a long time through multiple administrations that have done not much, right? And the thing too is like this stuff takes, for whatever reason, and this probably should be fixed. these legal cases against big tech usually take years.
Right.
And by the time you get to there was a thing about it, this with Meta just won a case, and it's like by the time the case was like concluded, like it almost didn't matter because the technology had changed so
It had
much. It
already
was like,
passed.
so that should probably be fixed. And it's weird. This is a tough thing where these like economies of scale are so powerful, and they are good, like obviously, but like what we're talking about is like all these different businesses they have, and it's like, okay, well, obviously there are some negative externalities associated with one company being super good at all kinds of different stuff, and
Well, I would like, for instance, that's a really good point you bring
but
up.
positive externalities too.
Like with the emergence of AI search, right? Just the way that that's taking off, that's already calling into question the arguments about Google dominating search, because you already see so many people utilizing these different, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
and I think a judge in one of their cases already mentioned that, was like, well, I don't know, AI is kind of disrupting search anyway, so like, what are we talking about?
right. Yeah. And there's new ones popping up all the time that people are paying for subscription services to. And it just so happens that Google is also growing their search. And
Yeah, I mean, I never use Google as a basic search platform anymore.
I don't either. I
should say almost never.
Well,
Google Images is actually still better than what I use for AI usually, but
well, I just use, well, I'll search Google. I just rely on the Gemini
right.
kickback all the time.
Yeah.
I don't look at the actual Google search information because the Gemini is better.
Yep.
And again, I want to reinforce that in case people know. Keep in mind, right? The biggest constraint I would say in AI development right now is buying the chips. Right? That's the biggest spend.
And the power, yeah.
And the power. Okay, well, Google just made a leap ahead of virtually every other LLM out there without using any NVIDIA chips.
Yeah, roughly a fifth of the cost of the NVIDIA chips for them.
Fifth.
So, because you don't have to eat those, you don't have to eat that margin pain.
I don't see how they don't sell a bunch of those.
Yeah, I mean,
I would also think people would probably start experimenting with tying them together.
Yeah,
with
and
NVIDIA chips.
And people are going to, try to make their own.
Yeah.
Like, well, that's a good idea. And other people already are. Like Amazon has their own chip. I think Meta has their own chips. Like everyone's kind of already doing it to some degree. They just haven't had that breakthrough success, like making the best model without NVIDIA yet. And NVIDIA chips are always going to be there because they're general purpose instead of, specific purpose for just training an AI model. But so if you want to do, some medical research thing or whatever, like, well, use a GPU makes sense. But as much as specialization tends to take over in the end, I would assume you just kind of have a chip for everything in the future. It's like, well, let's go ahead and use the chips that are specifically for that, not just a general purpose one. Like almost by definition, you're probably leaving some efficiency on the table by using a general purpose thing versus a specific purpose thing, if you can.
Yeah. Yeah. What else do you see? Anything else interesting you saw in the market today?
Oh man.
One thing interesting I saw that I haven't seen in a while is that up day across the board, even with international stocks, the dollar was a little bit up.
Yeah. And I think that is worth noting. This is interesting. So we've been all over the place with those great cut odds for December. You went from like fully priced to Powell taking it down to like 80 to it going all the way to 30 and then back to 50, then back to 75. I would have thought when you went from, it's all priced to being 30, like that would have hit the dollar some, and it kind of didn't. So that's notable. But on the flip side, like now that the TGA is filled back up, the dollar kind of follows that a little bit. Followed it higher as we went up with it. But now that it's peaked out, that should make it harder for the dollar to keep moving higher. So that whole thing gets interesting. It's at an inflection point. Like you're right there where it becomes a breakout if it rips higher. And if it doesn't, then it looks like, okay, well, it's capped here. So the dollar is going to be really important moving forward. Like, and for us, like with all of our overseas, if it rips out of this consolidation, then we got to trim overseas exposure.
It'd be really interesting to see what would happen with a dollar rip higher, because there's part of me that thinks that a dollar rip higher would hit everything at this point, not just international. And the reason I say that is looking at where you're at on the valuation side of it, the froth out there. I don't think a dollar, if we were trading cheaper and we didn't have kind of these signs of froth in the market, I would think that a dollar popping and threatening to move higher and kind of a breakout on the dollar would
I think if it coincided with rates ripping higher, then I think you're right. I think even U.S. risk would not appreciate it. But if rates stay flat to down or only up a little bit with the dollar moving higher, I think U.S. stocks probably just get the inflows and from overseas and you get stuck in that, last 15 years of muscle memory.
Yeah. The other thing that I have seen, we're not the only ones in the world that realize that U.S. markets tend to have a Santa rally. This tends to be a very difficult time of year for markets to go down. Generally, what is it, like 8 out of 10 Decembers finish up or something like that?
And when you have a negative November, Decembers tend to be very strong.
Yeah. I would not be surprised at all if that dynamic takes over and mutes out everything else. What I would say, though, and history's been a bit of a teacher of this, think about the end of 2021. Meaning you had a killer rally on the indexes through the end of the year, right up to that last quarter, and right in the face of what at the time we were sitting there going, this makes no sense. Rates are going up. What are they doing? And then what happened? 2022 comes in, and then boom,
rough year for risk.
The guillotine dropped quick. So I'd be careful of that too. I'd be careful of not reading in if we get that Santa Claus rally and that move higher in the end of the year. I'll take it gladly, right? It'll have me even more cautious when the new year comes around. I'll definitely be looking over my shoulder.
I think that's basically my base case. As of the close today, it looks like we're kind of neutral to maybe even positive gamma going into tomorrow, which should quiet down the vol, take some of the left tail stuff off the table, which to me definitely opens you up to just grinding higher the rest of the year. But I agree, like all this AI stuff we've been talking about, the headwinds for the overexposed to CapEx hyperscalers, the suddenly has competition NVIDIA, and NVIDIA has had two prominent news failures, blowout earnings. The market didn't care. It's still below there. And then the White House kind of floating oh, maybe we'll let them sell the H200s to China. And the next thing you know, it's market's yeah, I don't care. That is two really big news failures. But I think you look at the chart, it's the Gemini 3 launch, and it's just Google off to the races, and then NVIDIA down because NVIDIA, for the first time, really is oh, do we have some competition?
Mm-hmm.
So, if Oracle, Meta, and even NVIDIA become, I'm not even saying they're in some huge drawdown. Well, Oracle already is, but if they're just kind of flat to down 10% from here to 6 months from now, that's a huge deal. And NVIDIA is almost flat on the year. I mean, it hasn't had a great year already. So yeah, I tend to agree. Maybe you rip through December and you get everyone back on side, and the CTAs fill back up and vol control fills back up and vol goes to 15, 16, 17, whatever. I could easily see that happening, but then I think you would go into February or whatever with probably way too much, optimism.
Yeah.
That would be my base case now, but that's, it's based on all kinds of stuff that can change in 2 seconds.
Yep. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. Well, me neither. As always, guys, you can follow us on social media. I'm at KYR Radio on Twitter. Chase is at Pinecone Macro. And get our video feeds. Video feeds are not going to be posted this week. Weren't at the end of last week. Our videographer is out on vacation, so he's just going to be posting the audio feeds. But you can get us, any of your podcast places, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it. Just search Know Your Risk Podcast. Go to BulwarkCapitalManagement.com. Go to KnowYourRiskPodcast.com. Subscribe, sign up. You guys know the drill. We'll see you again tomorrow. Have a wonderful evening. Until then, you're listening to Know Your Risk Podcast. Download and subscribe at KnowYourRiskPodcast.com.
Investment advice cannot be given without a client service agreement. Zach Abraham is an investment advisor representative of Trek Financial, an SEC registered investment advisor. Bulwark Capital Management is a marketing name only and does not carry a separate registration.